Hey, what is going on, Psych students? We are going to finish the Riddler today. We started him yesterday. Hopefully you enjoyed his episode. Again, that's one of my favorite episodes with the Riddler. It is my favorite episode with the Riddler, and one of my favorite episodes altogether as well. So let's go ahead and get into the diagnosis. A lot of his diagnoses. This is one of the riddles that was optional in the discussion questions, just to kind of be fun. So you think you're smart, you think you can challenge the intellect of the Riddler. To proceed, you must solve the riddle. What is the beginning of eternity, the end of time and space, and the beginning of every end, and the end of every race? What am I? It's easy. It's the letter E, right? So, the disorder that the Riddler has is narcissistic personality disorder and OCD. He is obsessed with riddles clues to the point that it prevents him from functioning in normal life. It always leads to his downfall. He simply has to leave a clue. He has to leave a riddle for Batman to find. So that is clearly OCD. It reaches a level where he has no sex drive that we're aware of, or other interests in really anything other than fooling Batman. One thing that I like about the Arkham games is that it really shows that aspect of him. Like his hygiene and everything comes second to developing these plans to fool Batman, because he's just that determined to beat Batman and prove that he has the superior intellect. His extreme ego drives him to do unethical and sometimes sociopathic acts. Like Poison Ivy, the Riddler will kill if it benefits his obsession. However, again, just because you kill somebody doesn't mean you have antisocial personality disorder, you're a sociopath, or whatever. So the author says it's actually quite clear that he definitely has narcissistic personality disorder. You should look up some of his quotes. You rewatch the episode, and you get to really see this guy is really obsessed with himself. He really thinks that he is the world's smartest person. There are several quotes from the Arkham games. Like, if you play the Arkham games, especially Arkham Knight, you just listen to the things that the Riddler says, and you get the semblance that this guy really does think that he is the greatest person ever, and that everybody else is beneath him, right? Like, if you really pay attention to the Riddler's words, you can see that narcissistic personality disorder very clearly. And then OCD, because he simply has to leave. It is obsessive. It is compulsive. He has to leave a riddle or a clue behind, right? He just has to. Now, again, if you feel that the episode wasn't enough to get that from, I just want to remind you that you do have these, which are meant to guide you in your quest to diagnose these guys. So the Riddler sheet, again, that will give you further comic books if you're interested in the villain, things that would be, maybe things that I think are really good representations of the character. Has superego seeks to prove, superego, that was literally on the slide on narcissistic personality disorder. It said superego on it. So there are definitely hints towards the diagnosis on all of these. Batman Zero Year is probably the best Riddler story in my opinion, because he takes over Gotham, and I don't think that you really get any better than that with the Riddler. The Arkham games are also really good with the Riddler as well. Alright, today's villain that we're going to look at, because she comes up through the notes just naturally, is Harley Quinn. Alright, so she's not in the Rogues Gallery. She's not like an option that you can pick, because we just naturally get to her through the notes. She fits very well. Although I will say, although it's certainly not planned, we have been going through things in a very logical way. Like we did trauma with Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze had a very traumatic experience. When we were looking at why wear a mask and how Batman uses fear as a weapon, we did Scarecrow. When we did Two-Face, we were looking at criminal psychology. Two-Face is a mob boss, essentially. Criminal psychology. He's an average Joe that through a traumatic experience was brought to criminal acts. And then when we learned about narcissistic personality disorder, we looked at the Riddler, and Harley Quinn, is in the notes already. So we're actually doing things in a really good way, I think. So she's really good in Batman White Knight and Curse of the White Knight. Mad Love is the episode where she first is made in the Batman the Animated Series. Well, that's when she's given her origin story. That's not when she's first made. Duh. She's in the Suicide Squad movie. She's really very well portrayed in the Arkham games. Personally, and she has her own animated show right now. Personally, I think that she is at her best when she is not an anti-hero. It really bothers me when they make female characters who were villains into anti-heroes. Like, we need good female villains as well. You can't be afraid to have a female villain. Like, I just think that's really stupid. But at any rate, what won't run long without winding? I honestly don't remember the answer to that one. I want to say a clock, but I can't remember. Oh yeah, I forgot to put that in there. Anyway, he is sane. I don't really think there's a really good argument to say that he's insane. He really doesn't even commit too many horrible crimes. Most of his crimes don't actually put a lot of people in danger. Very rarely. Now, in the episode we watched, he wanted revenge, but that's if somebody wants revenge, that's not a sign of insanity. I am nothing like the Joker. Why does everybody keep saying that? That clown is only interested in mirth, mayhem, and murder. I, on the other hand, live for mental challenges, games of wit, the chance to outsmart worthy opponents. The Riddler. So he is sane. We have his disorders. I think I skipped his treatment, though. Psychotherapy and a series of drugs beginning with, however you pronounce that, because that's the drugs given for OCD. All right, narcissistic personality disorder is something you just have to get cured through, therapy. Again, it's more of a maturity thing. People usually grow out of it. So today's topic is the Madhouse. What insanity? All right, so Arkham Asylum, Batman says in the 1989 movie, sometimes I question the rationality of my actions, and I'm afraid that when I walk through those asylum gates, when I walk into Arkham and those doors close behind me, it'll be just like coming home. Not to say that he's worried that he is losing his mind. So this is kind of clarifying what insanity is. A psychotic person could be sane. To acquit by reason of insanity, the jury would have to believe that the defendant is so mentally ill that they didn't understand the nature of their actions or didn't know that their actions were wrong. Case in, example, if your neighbor tells you to shoot somebody, you know it's wrong. If a hallucinatory elephant tells you to shoot some people, you might still know that it's wrong. The question is whether or not the person knows what they're doing is moral or not. So, for example, in Mr. Freeze's case, he's killing people, he's hurting people, but does his mental illness of antisocial personality disorder make it to where that he is not aware that his actions are morally wrong? Does he feel that he's so justified that he honestly would be confused when you tell him that his actions were wrong? And I think that's the case with Mr. Freeze. But you look at, like, the Riddler, I think that he knows what he's doing is wrong. He just doesn't care, right? He just wants to prove that his intellect is superior. But ultimately, that's something that's decided by the court and the jury, and it is ultimately subjective to how good of a lawyer somebody has. And that's why in these notes I tend to say that, if this was to go to court of law, what would most likely happen? All right? So in Gotham, however, the logic is a little bit different because you only go to an asylum if you're deemed insane. Question number 1, did the defendant wear a costume when committing the crime? If yes, move on to question 2. Were the crimes centered around a compulsion or theme such as the number 2, plants, or riddles? If yes, they go to Arkham Asylum. They're insane. In the real world, of course, that's not how it works. But in comic book Gotham logic, that I guess is how it works. Question number 3, could you easily imagine this type of criminal living in and committing this type of crime in the real world? If yes, they are sentenced to Blackgate Penitentiary, which is Gotham's prison. So looking at the Mad Hatter here, Jervis Tetch, he first appears in Batman number 49 in 1948. He is arguably the maddest of the madmen to earn a spot in Batman's Rogues Gallery. He is a boy who's picked on severely for his appearance. He found solace in the story Alice in Wonderland. He developed a fixation on the Mad Hatter and finding his Alice. He uses mind control devices in hats to control people, often young girls, to be his Alice. As you can see here in this image, he usually puts masks with brain control devices on henchmen, and that's how he gets his muscle to kind of commit his crimes. We are not going to watch an episode on Jervis Tetch the Mad Hatter. I would love to show you an episode from Gotham because I think they absolutely nail the character, and so do the Arkham games. And if I'm not mistaken, yeah, that's not a spoiler. If I'm not mistaken, I believe he has a sheet. I know he has a case file sheet. The diagnosis is already given for you because we kind of just go over it in class. He's worthy of kind of talking about further, and he's the Mad Hatter, Batman's big villains. Diving deeper into his character, if you want more on him, I would watch the Gotham season where he's the villain, which I don't really remember I think it's 3, but don't quote me on that. So, clearly in the Batman the Animated Series, they can't show him in his full character because it's a kid's cartoon. You can't do him. You wouldn't be able to pick up on his disorders because it's a cartoon, and they're not going to show his pedophilia in a kid's cartoon. So Jervis Tetch is a known paranoid schizophrenic and pedophile. He has many delusions produced by schizophrenia, hallucinations. He's very paranoid. He is extremely paranoid. Articulate that very well. He uses drugs and mind-controlled tech to elicit others to his hallucinations. He is known for taking young girls, usually from the age of 14 to 16 years old, under his control to be his Alice. It is never consensual. He always puts one of his mind control devices and dresses her up as Alice. Fixation for children over adults that includes sexual fantasies and urges. He could be in typology of pedophiles, a child molester of either the inadequate or fixated type, the particular immature types. AKA, he is still a kid in his mind and sexual urges and has a hard time knowing reality from delusion. His body grew up as an adult, but his brain is stuck at the age of a 14-year-old, and same thing with his sexual preferences. So he prefers 14, 16-year-olds because that's where his brain is still. And again, because of his schizophrenia, he has a hard time knowing what is reality and what is a delusion. Again, somebody can hallucinate things verbally, auditory, tactfully, meaning they can touch, hear, smell, see their hallucinations. There's really no way for them to know that it's not real. Especially when you're like Jervis Tetch and you don't have a lot of friends to tell you, hey, who are you talking to? Right? So whenever Batman goes and stops Jervis Tetch is always completely, he doesn't understand why Batman's trying to stop him. He has no clue what he's doing is wrong. He's like, why are you trying to stop me? Like, I just want to be happy with my Alice. He has no comprehension of what he's doing is wrong. It's incredibly obvious, not so much in the Gotham, but in the comic books and in the Arkham games, which are very loyal to the comic books. It's very clear that he is unaware that what he's doing is wrong. So treatment for the Mad Hatter would be antipsychotic drugs such as Thorazine, Chlorozole, or Risperdal, and hospitalization. He needs to be institutionalized. He is not safe to be out in public. And he is very clearly insane. Because again, when Batman tries to stop him, he is 100% obviously like, why do you keep bullying me, Batman? Why are you trying to ruin my time? Like, I'm just trying to be happy with Alice. He has absolutely no comprehension that what he's doing is wrong. All right. So the Mad Hatter is insane. Honorable mentions. These are smaller scale villains that the author does not spend time on, but that I think deserve some attention. First is Man-Bat, otherwise known as Robert Kirkland or Kirk Langstrom. If you remember at the beginning of the notes when I gave my little introduction, I said I am Dr. Langstrom. This is a guy that's obsession with Batman and his desire to study bats to cure like people who are deaf or blind. He wants to be able to make bat sonar accessible to humans. And so he ends up experimenting on himself, and it ends up making him into this monster. He ends up, sometimes in some iterations, he kills his wife, and other times she becomes like Man-Bat. But the most common version is, he's obsessed with Batman. He loves bats. He's looking for a way to give humans sonar to help the blind people be able to see better, through sonar, not sight. And, he doesn't have test subjects, so he experiments on himself. And while it works, it has a horrible side effect. It transforms him into this. He first appears in 1970 in Detective Comics number 400. Suggestive, and I'm not going to give diagnoses for these villains because the author doesn't do it, and he's the licensed psychologist. I don't give you any diagnoses in this notes that are not coming from a licensed psychologist and psychiatrist. So suggested media would be Batman, Arkham, Man-Bat. It's kind of like the Poison Ivy book I showed you earlier, and the video game Arkham Knight. He's not in Arkham City or Arkham Asylum. He's only in Arkham Knight as a side thing. It's kind of a sad story. I find him a very compelling villain. Usually Batman ends up finding a cure for him and helping him, but then, Kirk Langstrom's usually so traumatized by killing his wife and killing the people that he does during his time as Man-Bat that he is kind of like PTSD level traumatized. There are some iterations where he does that are a little bit happier. In the current run of Justice League Dark, he is kind of like he's found a way to keep the bat shape but not be a savage Hulk-like creature. So he's kind of like a mix. Anyway, he's an okay character. Now, the thing is, when you're playing Arkham Knight, you'll just be playing and then all of a sudden, bam, he's there. And it freaking scares the living heck out of you. And you're like, oh my gosh, don't do that. But, so this is what he looks like in the Justice League Dark comics right now. This is the Arkham, this collects all of his greatest appearances in one volume, so if you like Man-Bat, you want to take a look at that. The next villain is Professor Pig, and they did, honestly, an amazing job with him in Gotham. Honestly, I don't think you could do better with Professor Pig than in Arkham Knight and in Gotham. Professor Pig is a deranged schizophrenic who has developed an obsession with making people, quote-unquote, perfect, which he accomplishes by transforming them into Dollatrons, a process that bonds false doll faces to their own, presumably permanently. Professor Pig uses cordless drills, hammers, and ice picks. It bothers me I don't have the Oxford comma there. Along with the doll faces in the process of converting his victims into Dollatrons. It appears that the operation he performs involves brain surgery or a lobotomization of his victims and possibly gender realignment. Behind the mask, he is a middle-aged Caucasian male. Shocker. He wears a simple pig face mask and is often depicted wearing a makeshift surgical outfit, and he always listens to opera music while he is performing his surgeries. He's obsessed with opera. This is some of what he looks like. This is what he looks like in the Arkham game. This is what he looks like in Gotham. This is his comic book appearance. You can see here he's performed surgery attaching this guy's foot to his arm. That's kind of just what he does. And he always goes like, and he talks like, he's kind of weird. He's a weird villain. Kind of weird to do an impersonation of him, but anyway. The last of the small villains I'll look at is Killer Croc. Real name Waylon Jones. Detective Comics 153, 1983. Did I give suggested readings for Professor Pig? No, that's because he's really not in a lot of comic books. Good luck finding them, to be honest with you. But the Gotham show does a really good job with it. So Whalum Jones, Detective Comics, 523, 1983. Born with a medical condition that caused him to grow progressively more like a crocodile. His mother died in childbirth and his father abandoned him. Whalum was raised by his aunt, but her persistent drinking prevented an ideal household, as well as he was quite ugly. As a teenager, Croc was the object of ridicule. By the time he reached adulthood, Whalum found work wrestling alligators as part of a carnival sideshow, where he earned the name Killer Croc. Croc soon realized that there was more money to be made in crime, and with his super strength and all that, well, why not? So he set out to become Gotham's most powerful underground figure. Suggested readings would be Batman Arkham Killer Croc, which is kind of like another volume where it collects all of his greatest appearances. Or I would also suggest Batman Hush. He has a cool appearance in that as well. This is what he looks like. This is a statue of him, which I think looks really cool. This is a comic book cover that he appeared on. This is what he looks like in Suicide Squad. He's usually from Louisiana. He's usually African American. Always. Oh, I forgot about Clayface. Clayface, real name Basil Carlo, Detective Comics 40, came out in 1940. He is an actor who is driven mad when he hears of a remake of the classic horror film he starred in, Dread Castle, adopting the persona of quote-unquote Clayface, the villain of one of his old films. He becomes a serial killer targeting the cast and crew of this remake film. He eventually is stopped by Batman and Robin. Later, Carlo would be imbued with the powers of Clayface after a bad deal with a local mob boss. There is actually a really good episode, 2 episodes in the Batman animated series. I'm not going to make you watch them, but they're really good. And it does a really good job of showing off the character. There's also a volume, Batman Arkham Clayface, of all of his greatest comic appearances. But if you really want a cool Clayface appearance, you want to play Arkham City or watch the animated series episodes. And these are what he looks like in various occurrences. Alright, other villains of note, Victor Zsasz. He was a villain in the Harley Quinn Birds of Prey movie, but it's not a very loyal adaptation of him. He's basically a serial killer who puts a tally mark on cuts a tally mark into himself every time he kills somebody. Calendar Man, you see here, he kills people on holidays, and his crimes are always revolved around holidays. Ventriloquist is a guy that has a sentient puppet who is a mob boss. Hush is a guy that will have like surgery done on his face to take the appearance of, like, for example, Bruce Wayne, to do impersonations of him. The Court of Owls or the Talon are a secret assassin group that run Gotham without Batman knowing it. I will show you that comic book later on. It's so good. It's one of my favorites. Deadshot is basically a hitman that never misses. Raz or Raish and Talia al Ghul are the leader of the... oh wow, goodness. The League of Assassins. Such an easy name to remember. Otherwise called the Demon's Head. And they're really just Batman Begins, I think, does them probably the best. Basically, they're an assassin group that's bent on kind of giving the world a restart. And so their plan is usually to destroy Gotham, to give Gotham a restart because Gotham's too corrupt to save. Firefly, who you see down here, he's obsessed with setting fires, and he can fly. The Falcone and Maroni crime families, Rupert Thorne, are usually like the mob bosses, your Al Capone, if you will. The Condiment King is just a goofy character that shoots mustard and ketchup. Yes, he's a real thing. And King Kraken is basically kind of like a subterranean kind of character. You also have Deathstroke, who is also a mercenary, and he usually fights Batman kind of like the same reasons Bane does, because he hears Batman's this great warrior, and Slade feels threatened by that. So here we have Raz or Ra's al Ghul. Here's Ra's al Ghul in the Batman Begins movie. He's played by Liam Neeson. Here's the ventriloquist, his sentient puppet, which usually has a Tommy gun. Here's the Talon from the Court of Owls, and here is King Kraken. There's more Court of Owls, more Court of Owls. There's Hush, guy that has surgery to look like other people. Very good stuff. All right, so let's get to Harley Quinn. So Dr. Harleen Frances Quinzel first appears in the Batman the Animated Series Season 4, Episode 22. Season 1, Episode 22, called Joker's Favor, on September 11th, 1992, the year that I was born. But the thing is, when she's first made, she's really just kind of a henchman for the Joker, and that's really all of the development that she has on those episodes. She doesn't get her origin story until Season 4, which is the episode that we're going to watch. She is a Brooklyn girl. Harleen Quinzel grows up with one non-criminal parent and one lawbreaker parent, that being her con artist father, who constantly tries to charm older women and fleece them out of their fortunes. Even the Harley Quinn animated show tells you how much of a scumbag her dad is. He even tries to con Harley when in prison. She had this to say: "The reason I became a psychiatrist was so that I could understand why you did the things you did. You are an intern at Arkham, where she treats the Joker. The Joker plays on her interests and insecurities. He charms her. Serial killers usually are quite charming. With a wink, tempts her with secrets, earns her sympathy with lies about his father, and wins her heart by making her laugh. Harley gives up her career as a psychiatrist and helps Joker escape for love. If only he was genuinely in love with her." This is what she looks like. This is what she looks like in the Arkham Knight game, which is my personal favorite. This is Suicide Squad. This is her in the White Knight. This is her in Arkham City. And this is her in the Justice League versus Suicide Squad comic book, which was kind of a huge letdown. So before we dive into her diagnosis, we'll leave you to the episode and all that. I'll give you one more quote, which is from the episode you're going to watch, called Mad Love. "It soon became clear to me that the Joker, so often described as a raving homicidal madman, was actually a tortured soul crying out for love and acceptance, a lost, injured child trying to make the world laugh at his antics. Yes, I admit it, as unprofessional as it sounds, I had fallen in love with my patient." Crazy, huh? So with that, you are going to have your Canvas questions. Our villain for the day is Harley Quinn. Tomorrow we will finish her diagnosis after you've observed her episode, and everything will be hunky-dory. There will be a question to pick a villain for, not tomorrow, but the next day, right? My guess would be it's probably going to end up being Superman, but that would work out pretty well. Catwoman or Superman are kind of the ones that you have left to pick from. But hopefully you enjoyed today. I like this day because I get to talk about a lot of the other villains I wouldn't normally get to talk about. Enjoyed that Harley Quinn episode. It's really good. And you get to hear Mark Hamill, aka Luke Skywalker, doing the Joker's voice in that episode as well. Peace out. Have a good day. See you tomorrow.